service this evening. So what we're going to do is we're going to replay our Wednesday evening service, which was our first in a series of teaching on being a mentor like Jesus. So turn in your Bibles to Ephesians chapter 4 and join in with us as we replay Series 1 in Being a Mentor like Jesus. Thanks for joining us.
We're going to be in Ephesians chapter 4 eventually, but we have several things that we want to talk about here tonight with God's help. And we're going to be talking about the topic or the word that we want to focus on with God's help is mentoring. To be a mentor. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but kind of want to give you some background on what's going on in our heart and our mind. So, going to be honest, tonight's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Challenge for me, challenge for you, because I'm actually bringing something out that is a new concept, is a new thought, and it's nothing that we have taken lightly whatsoever. But you know, you hear people whenever they stand in front of a crowd. There's a lot of times that you have to be vulnerable sometimes whenever you stand before people. That's where I'm going to be tonight. I'm going to share some things from the bottom of my heart that you don't often hear me or a pastor say because, you know, we're the leaders. We're the spiritual leaders. Sometimes we got to be the rah-rah person, right? You got to keep everybody going and everybody moving. But there's some things that I want to share tonight with this lesson that's probably going to open up in a little bit of a different way. I want to lay out some concerns, some things that we see, some thoughts that we have upon our heart. So it would be very easy to make this statement is that everybody that attends this church needs to hear what I've got to say tonight. And all I've got to say about that is they're not here. So I'm going to share it with you. This is what God has given me. This is the time that God has given it to me. And hopefully there are others that might be able to catch up on it at some point. Again, you know, we all know we're online. You can go back and watch it. But to me, this is where we've got to start. Everything has to have a starting point. And so this is where we are. This is a thought that has been upon my heart for a long time. And I guess in a sense, I've avoided it a little bit. I've run from the thought. But after some of the series of things that we've had, I tried to run from it again, and God wouldn't let me, because every time that I tried to study something else, He would shut that door in a hurry. So it's time to bring it out. So we're going to get with that. So as a church, as individual Christians, we need to sometimes ask these questions here. Where are we? And do we need to grow? You know, where are we as an individual, and where are we as a group? Do we need to grow? Do I need to grow as a church, as an individual? Is that needed? So, you know, our attendance at church is spotty. And to be blunt, some services is downright lousy. And I told you, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be open tonight. And the change starts within us. And it starts here. Dedication from members of the church is not as strong as it should be. So it's kind of like the whole political thing that we talk about, you know, and I sat back here and I listened to what everybody was thinking. I thought, man, were y'all looking over my shoulder whenever I was preparing this lesson or what? Because you look out in the country, some of our forefathers, some that have gone on before us, would look at our country and they would look at us and, why have you let this happen? It's the same thing with the church. Some that have gone on and outstripped us, they would walk in the doors and they would say, why have you let this happen? So it starts with us. So, as always, you know, we always like to think about that word growth. We like to define it. You know, it's the act or the process of growing. But yet, I would like to kind of take that a step further, and it's development. We look at a baby, and how that a baby grows and how it develops. As a Christian, we grow and develop. As a church, we grow and develop. Now, I'm not, again, I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way. This is not intended to make anybody feel guilty. It's not to step on any toes. It's not to scrape feelings. But it is to bring us to a realization of where we are, of what we have become. I mean, it's just that simple. So we need to work on fixing some of the issues that are here. It's not to blame. It's not to point fingers. It's not to accuse this one or that one how that they can do better. You know, you've heard me say before, everything, it always starts with the person that's looking back at us in the mirror. There's not a one of us that's perfect, but there's always things that we can do better. So, the way that I would like to present this tonight is that everyone needs to join me and say, I need to do better. Okay? And we can do better together. You with me on that? I can do better, and we can do better together. Okay? And that's part of what a church is supposed to do. So if you remember 3 weeks ago, whenever Brother Michael, he did his first presentation, and, he got on a roll. And man, he just rolled a bunch of things out there, and at the end I used an example. Take a 55-gallon drum, and, that's where all that information could fit in a 55-gallon drum, and how does it fit in our head? Remember, I asked you to put your fingers around your head and say, it nowhere matches that 55-gallon drum. Well, let's go beyond the last 3 weeks where Brother Michael was talking about visitation. Let's go back to some of our Bible studies that we've had about our growing, our relationship with the Lord, prayer, relationships. Let's begin to think about the last few weeks, the last few months, the last few years, the time that we have been involved in church and the things that we've learned. We have a barrel of experience and knowledge sitting right here tonight. But yet we ain't got an answer to everything, do we? But we have a lot of experience. We have a lot of knowledge. We have a lot of wisdom that just needs developed. Now we all know we can't do anything without the Lord. So by that, but that's where this concept of mentoring, being a mentor, being mentored, they work together. It is a process. Most likely, 100% of the people that attend the church here are not going to participate in it. Most likely. But I would be thrilled to death if everybody did. Okay? But I understand, not everybody's going to take part. But I pray that everybody will very earnestly and will very prayerfully consider it before you cast it aside. It's not a program. It's certainly not a gimmick. But it's not going to be, an official rule or law of the church. But it's a commitment. And anything that we do, if we want it to be successful, anything in life that we do, if it's going to be successful, it requires commitment. So, how do we grow? And, that is a huge challenge, not just here at the Gospel Chapel, not just in Daniels, not just in West Virginia, worldwide. This is a question that many people face and are trying to figure out how that we can grow and how that we can develop it. And there's some of these people that are out there that are so-called experts, if you will. And, they can tell you about the traits and the techniques and how that you can grow a church and all of these different things. But getting people to come to church, now let this one sink in. Getting people to come to church is actually easier than getting people to grow as a Christian. How hard do we struggle getting people to come to church? We all know that that's hard, but to actually get growth, that's where it's hard. And that's why churches are struggling, is because that development and that growth is not happening. So to piggyback on something there that Jeff was talking about that earlier, and I'm not talking about, a numerical growth. Don't get me wrong. I wish the Gospel Chapel would turn into a mega church and we would have 2,000 members right here on C&O Dam Road to have that impact on the community. But if it doesn't happen, we're here as God's people to do what He puts before us. We are here to grow, and there's a lot of churches that have developed and use. We've talked about it here in the past. We've tried it in a couple different fashions. But, the concept of small groups, there's a lot of churches that use that because that is where a lot of the growth and the fellowship that they have seen have worked together, is in the small groups. And that'll be a topic for another day. But, again, this is just part of how that fellowship is nurtured. We are, most people would consider us a small church. So by that, we already have fellowship. And generally speaking, you could say that everybody here is friends one with another. So, that is a hurdle that we don't have to overcome that some of the big churches do. When you've got a 1,500, 2,000 member church, they don't know the people sitting on the other side. They may have never ever met them. So that's why that's a hurdle for them. That one we don't have, okay? Yay, right? We're already friends. We already have that fellowship. But to have a deep soul development, that as a church, as Christians, as a whole and as individuals, that our soul would develop this deep walk and relationship with the Lord. That's where that sometimes we need a little guidance. Some things that's in addition to Sunday morning worship, Sunday evening worship, Wednesday night Bible study. In a group setting, there's just some things, even though that we get kind of open from time to time, but some of that deeper development within us does not happen in a group setting. So whenever that we begin to grow, and I'm going to tell you things about the future. So if this really gets rolling, whenever you are a mentor and you have a mentoree, whenever that mentoree becomes a mentor, that's whenever you can see growing, right? That's whenever. So, how is it that we get there? How do we do that? So, again, we've got to be vulnerable and accountable to each other. For any of this to work, we need to be accountable and vulnerable to each other. And that's why that sometimes it's not appropriate to share things in a group setting. Whenever you're working in a one or two group, and again, doing mentoring, that can happen as a group of two or a group of three. And I wouldn't recommend going any bigger than that. But you can actually get very sharing and very intimate with your needs, with your problems and things like that, that you may not always want to bring out in a church setting. There are times as friends, we share some of those deeper things with our friends. We just do. But friends don't always give you the spiritual direction that's needed for the growth. Am I making sense? Okay. Now we all need friends. Okay? We need friends. But sometimes for that deeper walk, we need something a little bit more than that. So, we're going to, like I said, we're going to look at Ephesians chapter 4 here in a few minutes. But whenever that we think about us as a church, to my knowledge, this has never been done here. This has never been tried here. But I hope that we can do this. I hope that we can get it started, and I hope that we can get it moving. We're going to, over this week and next week, we're going to bring some examples out of the Bible that gives us, what we see as some good examples about being a mentor. So what is that? That is somebody that is considered to be spiritually mature, spiritually wise, very transparent, self-understanding, and can provide guidance for growth and development in another person. Okay, we got to check out, right? No. Remember, we've got a barrel of knowledge and wisdom here. I think there's a lot of times that even we can mentor each other as we've been on the road for quite some time. I think that sometimes that is still needed within our walk and our life as the church. So whenever that, especially you think of taking somebody that is a younger believer, and by younger I'm not necessarily talking about age even. You think of somebody that's not been a Christian very long, don't have all the answers, right? I mean, if we need all the answers, we're gonna call Lois or Steve or Ruby, right? Y'all got all the answers, right? No. None of us have all the answers, do we? But again, we're going to work together. This is how it works. So, the relationship building, it's been a long time since we've talked about that now, but the relationship building, that's all part of that because we all tick just a little bit differently. But all of these things will work. As that, there are leadership qualities in every Christian. Some more than others, and some in different areas. But those leadership qualities come out in us as Christians because that's where that we can lead others to Christ. All right, let's look at Ephesians chapter 4 for a minute. Let's look at these verses. And I'm going to ask you to just go around. We'll start here with Belinda. We'll read verses 1 through 7 and skip down and get then verses 13 through 16.
I therefore, prisoner of God, beseech you that you walk worthy of the vocation wherewith ye are called.
With all holiness and meekness and long suffering, forbearing one another in love.
Endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace.
There is one body and one Spirit, even as ye are called in one hope of your calling.
One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God. Six, really.
Deb's trying to steal your verse.
But unto every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ.
All right, now let's skip down verses 13 through 16.
Till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ.
That we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men, and cunning craftiness, whereby thy lying wait to deceive.
But speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head of even Christ.
From whom the whole body fitly joined together and compacted by that which every joint supplieth, according to the effectual working in the measure of every part, maketh increase of the body unto the edifying of itself in love.
All right. So here in this chapter, Paul hits on a bunch of things. But generally speaking, you know, and I hope that you've picked them up as we've gone through the verses, Paul hits on unity. He hits on the diversity of all of our gifts as Christians. He also touches on maturity and growth. So there's a lot going on in chapter 4, and we could have actually used the whole chapter, but and we may pick more of it up later. And again, because I don't know how the next week or 2, 3 weeks, however long this takes, not exactly sure how it's all going to come to pass yet. But we need to see here how that, again, we live in a world today that needs the church united, stable, mature, and growing. You know, I look and I think about, you know, some of the things that I've read and heard this week. I wasn't sure whether to share this tonight or not, but I brought it, and so now it's seeming like this is the time to plug it in. And we've got troubles in America. We've got trouble in Daniels. We've got trouble in our homes. But I read of some of these things that are going on, like in Afghanistan. We got nothing. I mean, we got nothing. But I read an article that was actually written this week by a gentleman. He's a college professor down in Memphis, Tennessee. But what he does is he works with refugees, and particularly he has a connection with Afghan Americans. So he's got, you know, some connections here and in Afghanistan. So, and I'm not going to read the whole article. I just want to pull some bits and pieces out of it. So, you know, this whole pull out of the troops, this is something that's been working on for a little while. And I don't think that it's come down the way that it was originally intended, but that's a whole nother discussion. But still, in July, Afghan pastors and leaders, so we're talking a month ago, they came up to a very challenging decision, and they decided to formally register their faith with the Afghan government. Why would that be a problem? Besides that, in July there was. Why would that be a problem that they were telling the government they were Christians?
Identify themselves as Christians.
Yeah, it was illegal. And then the Taliban now coming in, what do they think about Christians? Yeah. So here they're registering as Christians, living in an Islamic republic that prohibits a person from converting to Christianity. So there were a lot of leaders that said, you don't need to be doing that. Let's just keep our church going. Let's do what we're doing. And they said, what about our children and our grandchildren? Someone needs to make the sacrifice so that the next generations can see and can openly call themselves followers of Jesus. So they went on, they registered with the government, they prayed, and then now, as this past weekend, as all this has happened, there was a pastor in an Afghan church, and again, this is in Afghanistan. This pastor received a letter from the Taliban. We know who you are, what you do, and we know where to find you. On Saturday, they went calling on this pastor's house. Fortunately, he was gone. He had fled. Another Afghanistan pastor, and I don't know how many churches are established over there, but a pastor shared an account that one of his followers in the church watched the Taliban take their 14-year-old daughter out of the house by force, forcing her into sexual servitude in what the Taliban would call marriage and say is their dutiful Islamic privilege and responsibility. These are the things that are going on over there that the Christians are still saying, we're going to take a stand, we're going to serve our God. I'll leave this letter out if anybody would like to read it, because he goes on and then cites some scriptural references with a retreat that they were having this last weekend. But, it's happening commonplace that they're coming in for the young girls, for the young ladies, and they're doing all of these things. But there is a gentleman a gentleman who is in Memphis. He is from Afghanistan, and part of his ministry is that he sends a broadcast across the internet waves over into that country. And after all the news of this weekend and some of these things, he wrote as part of this article, he said, "I don't even right now have words to pray. Yet tomorrow, I've got to go live online with a message of God's Word into Afghanistan that will be broadcast on Facebook for those that are still there." And we worry about some of the things we do. Okay? We don't have those type of concerns. So we look and, we've got gifts, we've got knowledge, we've got this barrel full of stuff that has been in our head and been in our teaching for years and years. What we have lost is that accountability. We've lost commitment. So, I'm going to ask a few questions in general here in a few minutes. And this is where it's a little vulnerable, little opening up of the heart a little bit, and sometimes a little bit blunt. But we have Sunday school classes here. Over the last little while, we've had to combine maybe 2 or 3 different age groups in one class, and sometimes still no kids show up. Ladies have gotten together and had meetings and activities sometimes, and had food and fellowship, and the men tried to do some things a time or two and tried to get some things where you develop a little bit of a deeper walking or a deeper relationship with things. And we've got volunteers that fill differing seats and things here within the church. Sometimes we've got, whether it be nursery, whether it be children's church, and people volunteer to fill it, and they forget, and they're out of town, or they got to work, and they don't have anybody fill that seat, and you leave things scrambling, and it's like we've lost the accountability and the commitment to do all of these things. And again, sometimes there's really good reasons for not following through, but you look at this and this and this, and it's real easy to see, man, there ain't none of that stuff working. Ouch. Now that's us. That's us. It's been almost 18 years that we've been here as pastor. One thing I've learned: we like to eat. We like fellowship. And again, generally speaking, everybody's friends. This church is a very giving, a very loving. There is a legitimate care one for another. But what we're failing miserably to do is to develop the church. That's where we're failing. We're not growing the church. We're not developing as a church. All right, question time. Church leaders, who are they? All right, I'm the pastor, I'm a leader, I guess. I'll throw that one out. You can't have that one. That one's too easy. Church leaders, who are they?
That's where I was going with. We all should be. No, that's where my thought process was. We should all be.
Okay. Anybody else? Thoughts? Teachers? Elders? Define elder.
Jamie?
See, I heard that.
Yeah, by that definition, it's everybody over 50, right?
Elder would be a seasoned Christian who'd been here for a long time.
Okay?
dedicated to the church, I don't know, just somebody you would look to for prayer.
Anything else?
Wisdom.
Okay? All right. Here's a real hard question. How do we hold our leaders accountable?
When they know better, and they do something they know better.
Okay?
We don't.
As a general rule in church, and this is not just a gospel chapel issue, as a general rule in any church, that is the number one answer right there. We don't. When election time comes, we just don't vote them in again, right? If it's an officer. So, whenever you think about, decisions and actions and things that people do, things that people don't do, but, how do you hold a leader accountable for growing spiritually, for growing their character? Because again, as church, now I'm going to go back to Donna and Carol's definition of leaders. That should be all of us. So how do we hold each other accountable? See, I'm going to turn it back on everybody now. Is how do we hold each other accountable for growing our character and growing spiritually?
Keep ourselves held accountable. First of all, you get what I'm trying to say.
I do, but this is where we're lacking, though. If we don't even hold leaders accountable, how do we hold each other accountable? Okay? So, and again, for an elected person, whether it's in the church or even if you want to say in the county, the state, the government, if you want to bring politics in it, if you don't like somebody, you just don't vote for them, right? Or if I don't like something that's going on, then I just stop participating. Is that what's going on?
Whenever someone takes a position, they are supposed to hold standards, obligations, attendance.
But has anybody ever told them that?
I don't know.
That should come in accountability towards maturity. That would cause a person to be more committed.
Whenever they take membership,
When
I
persons
read those things.
open themselves up to be a servant to the Lord, they've taken on a lot of responsibility. And their example speaks more than words a lot of times.
Oh, I agree with that. But again, when are people taught that?
Well,
I've been here for 18 years.
again, if we're reading and studying, it's going to reveal itself to us. That is between me and God, I'll be accountable to Him. But as far as you are the pastor that should point that out to me, basically is how I feel. If you see me, and I know a pastor right here in this church, a few years ago, that was a fill-in basically, and he loved us all dearly, but he spoke to a leadership in this church and let them know, where were you this week, last week, if you have a youth class or youth responsibility, well, I had to be here, there, and if it was a legitimate cause, you should have told somebody ahead of time, but you didn't, but they did this frequently. And we all knew the situation. That person got mad and absolutely left here. And it wasn't done harshly.
Well, and things happen, and that's why I was saying earlier, this is not, this is not intended to scrape, to make anybody feel bad. This is what we need to see is that accountability, nobody to blame, nobody to point the finger at, it's not here. It's gone.
We don't disciple people. We don't.
Right.
We don't prepare them for for what to go do.
Right. Oh yeah, that's not what this is for.
And that's not what I'm doing, and that, I'm just saying, I just wonder why they don't show up. And I mean, they do hold the position in the church, and I just wonder why they don't show up at the same time, you know. I question that, you know, and like I say, I'm not pointing fingers, but I've often, and I've even thought about saying something, but then, you know, I guess one of the reasons we don't say anything is because we will always say we want to offend that person, you know. And I will not say anything to offend anybody, and God forgive me if I will, to hurt their feelings. I would not ever want to say anything to anybody that would cause them to leave our church.
Right.
So I try to be careful in that stuff, but I have often wondered why they don't come that, you know, they only come that one time, you know. And they don't come for the week, I mean, you know, so. But I feel like, and then some of these people will show up when we have activities, like, you know, food or whatever, and I feel like if people show up for that, people show up anytime.
Yep.
But that's my opinion, and I'm not pointing out nobody, and God forgive me, and I, like I say, I would not want to offend anyone.
Right, and that's it. Nobody wants to hurt anyone's feelings. Nobody wants to make anybody leave because we ask them a question. But again, is that where we begin to see a difference between a friend and a mentor? Because again, we genuinely care. We genuinely love one another. And, you know, again, I'm throwing a lot of things out here that I hope to expand upon over the next couple of weeks. But, you know, we're good at becoming friends with each other. We're good at fellowship. I mean, we're good with the relationships that we have with one another. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Not saying that at all. But yet, I think that we can step that up just a little bit. So, I'm going to get specific, and I'm going to take it on a personal level. Don't anybody think that the pastor's gone off his rocker now because I've gotten permission to do this. How long have Adam and Emily been coming here?
I got to cheat. I got to talk to her today.
No cheating on the answers. If you know it.
I do. It's been about 4 years.
So December will make 4 years. I had to ask them that question. I didn't know what it was either because I was thinking 3 or 4 years. I did what somebody else was starting to do. Now wait a minute. How old are the girls when they come? Yes. So I'm going to ask you some questions about Adam and Emily because let's just say December will be here pretty soon. So let's just say they've been here 4 years. So how many kids do they have?
2.
Everybody knows that one, right? What are their kids' names? Zoe and Keatley. I'm not going to ask you to spell them. Which one is the older one?
Zoe.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. They are not twins. Which one is older? How old are they? I'm being repetitive in my own head.
They're 7, 6.
I don't know that. How old are they? 7 and 6. Okay. So see if you were trying to figure out how old how long they've been here by their age. So who knew Adam and Emily before they came here? Okay, Rob knew Emily. So you'll be disqualified on some of the questions here. Anything that pertains to Emily for the next couple of questions. So where does Adam work?
Yes.
North Beckley PSD. Where does Emily work?
Dr. Bob.
Who has... See, how do I want to ask this question? Because again, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. How many people have had a conversation with Adam and Emily outside of church?
Church building or outside
outside of church property. Who's had a conversation? Carol, don't count. Who knows where they live? Who knows anything about their faith? Like, what I mean by that is where they were saved, what churches they've attended, how old they were, anything like that.
How did they start coming here? Through you?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Does anybody know that?
I know the guy's name, but I can't think, it won't come to my mind. The preacher that, Orville. Is that how they started? I don't think so.
We were just looking for a church, and Luke worked with Emily at Shelton, and then we knew Rusty, and Rusty invited us to the Magic Farm.
Oh, cool.
So
Yeah, Emily knew Rusty and Marcia before coming here, and they still come. I hope you are listening, by the way. Does anybody know, are Adam and Emily, whether individually, collectively, are they capable of teaching a class here? Does anybody know if Adam and Emily, individually or collectively, would they be able to hold an office to actually be a leader here in the church?
Are they members?
I'm asking you if you know. Don't ask me questions. I'm asking you.
I know the answer. I honestly have never sat down and talked to them about their faith, so I would say no, because I don't really know.
So we've become friends with them for 4 years, but yet from a mentoring standpoint, we failed.
Yeah. You're assuming people, right?
Now does all this make a little bit more sense? See, I didn't want to do this in the front side. I wanted to throw all this other complicated stuff out first. And again, I could have used a few other people, but especially once they've been here 4 years, I thought, oh man, that's perfect. Now I'm not here trying to, be political for them and try to get them into an office or anything. It's not what I'm here to do. It's just to use this as an example to see, how that there are things that from a spiritual and a church perspective that we can take to a deeper level. This is not to reflect bad on anybody. This is not saying that, we're bad people. I'm not saying that at all. But we can mentor and that we can grow. We can teach them. They've probably already picked up some things. They're bright. They're smart. In 4 years, them dumb people out there, they haven't taught me a thing, but I figured it out. But there's still things that we can do, and that's how mentoring works. So, there's probably a lot of our people in leadership positions, elected positions here in the church, say, hey, I'm here, I'm where I'm at, and nobody's ever taught me. That's just how we roll. Look around us. How's that working? You think maybe it's time to change?
About them too, and I know that they came from a background of being in church.
Yeah.
And so we know that, so we just assume. But a lot of people today did not. People come into our church, they don't have a clue, they haven't been to church.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying, they don't know.
Yes.
Even on that note, we don't know their background, but everybody here knows my background and knows where I came from. And when teaching, sometimes my memory is not the best, and I might slip up and say the wrong thing in a Sunday school class or a church class. If I'm not held accountable for that, if you don't know somebody's background and they're teaching something that's totally off the wall, that's where you're gonna land, and that's how kids don't think things are important, because they're taught by somebody that,
Yeah.
We don't know anything about them.
Little birds in the milk the word, and as we grow and develop out, and we mature and we get older, we're supposed to get in the meat of the word. And we're not to crush no little bird in our hand. Well, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Jesus referred to the meal stone being put around, and if somebody drowned to death will see it, better that than defend one of these little ones that believe in
That's
him.
right. Jesus always looked out for the little ones. You are correct. So, these are the things where we can do better. And to a point, some of that might go on a little bit for a short period of time, and then you lose track of them.
It's hard to approach someone and ask those questions.
And that's why we need to pray about being mentors and mentorees. So that's where we're going to end tonight. But before we dismiss, I'm going to need a total of 6 volunteers. 3 men and 3 women. And before you volunteer, let me tell you what you're volunteering for. So, all the volunteers, you're going to come back next week. And you're going to come back here on Wednesday. We're going to have an open forum and an open discussion about mentoring with the men and the women. I'm going to give you some material, and you're going to get to spend some time together mentoring each other on what I have given you. And then you're going to come back and we're going to share. We're going to have this open discussion because, it does require a little bit of time, not a lot, just a little bit of time here and there to spend with somebody. And what a great opportunity, because we're already going to be together 3 days this weekend. The material that I give you is not going to take you very long to read. And then you come back and you discuss these things with each other, and then we'll come back and we'll have this open forum next Wednesday. All right? Hold each other accountable.